Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, February 21st, 2024, and I'm trying something different here and we'll see how quickly this goes badly. I think it's going to go badly pretty quickly here. Let's see. From the looks of it, I'm seeing, I'm trying to dual simulcast to both Twitch and YouTube, and yeah, I'm seeing just immediate drops in frames. So yeah, that's not going to work. Plus, I'm not 100% sure that we're even getting audio on Twitch, now that I think about it and look at it. But yeah, this was the kind of experiment that needed to happen, so we'll just go ahead and stop the stream to Twitch. Apologies for that. And move on with just streaming to YouTube. There might be an issue here, certainly around perhaps double recording being the problem too. Yeah, which that wasn't something that was supposed to happen either. And even now, I think I need to still do some things here. Let's stop the virtual camera and see if that fixes a lot. So most people, when they restream, they're using some kind of service like StreamYard or something where you're streaming to one place and then the servers are handling that. And usually I would assume that that is a case where you are paying money to have that service as a feature, and yeah, I'm too cheap for that, particularly when it comes to Twitch. Now that Twitch is not watching, that just doesn't really work. Like, I definitely wouldn't invest in restreaming to things like Twitch or, you know, Facebook or something. That's just not really the audience that I care about. So yeah, immediately the statistics on Twitch was dropping like 22% of frames, and the frame rates were dropping below 60 frames per second. Yeah. So let's see, I guess I'm going to just go ahead and close the second instance of OBS. And let's see if we can reset the statistics now on the first instance of OBS streaming to YouTube and see how that goes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everything is now just back to the way it was before. So, good experiment. It probably also highlights that my idea of having a second instance of OBS running, and it just really wouldn't have worked to make YouTube Shorts at the same time. There is definitely a desire and a need. It's a small desire to do more with Twitch in general and just not have all my eggs in one basket with YouTube. But yeah, Twitch's requirements to just be able to upload videos are very stringent and difficult, like, because you very much have to kind of kill yourself as a streamer. Well, I say that phrase probably too much nowadays. People they clutch at pearls when you use that phrase. Overly exhaust yourself is what I mean, being a streamer on Twitch, to get the permission to then be a pre-recorder who would upload videos to Twitch. Like, it's so much around streaming, and I just don't see a real reason why that is even the case. I would be, I mean, if it really was just a matter of they were trying to save storage space, just let me upload a video and then keep that video for only a short time, then delete it. Like, honestly, you could even block like the same videos being uploaded just by doing a simple hash on the video. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense that you can't upload anything until you're in the affiliate program on Twitch. But yeah, there was definitely a time, let's get into Yu-Gi-Oh here, where you could not simulcast to Twitch, and apparently there was some controversy around that, and apparently that was one of the things that Twitch reversed on it. So I guess if I can find a Restream website that's free, I should experiment with that. Because it does make a lot more sense for these news and broadcasts to try and reach as big of an audience as in particular. It's not really the content that I want people to watch the most of anyways, but it is also the content that I think is probably useful, since it is effectively a news presentation, and you as a news presenter would want to get your news out and seen in front of as many people as possible. So yeah, there's room for more experimentation there, which I definitely am just, I guess, in an experimenting mood at the moment. But I'm still also doing some other stuff. I'm streaming early today because I might be busy later today. I might not. And then for the accountability section, since I finished, these are both open. So I guess at this point I probably should just give up on this. I could stick with this to try and get to this 200 gems, which is really all I would care about. And I don't care about the title, and I don't care about legacy packs. But it would make a lot of sense here to just move over to the Synchro Link Festival instead and play towards at least this card protector, if not all the way through. So we'll play this loner deck. I started playing a game in between the last stream and this one called Death's Hangover. It's a weird Arkanoid clone in a lot of ways, in that the rooms are very square and not very zoomed out. So the ball really hits the backboard and bounces forward way too fast. You can slow down the ball, but by the time you're getting to the final boss fights, which this is a game with boss fights, you're basically having to slow down the ball every single time. Just hold down the slow down button, and even then you're dodging weapons being fired at you from the bosses, which is a little bit weird, and you're dying quite a bit. And then when you run out of lives, if you've collected souls throughout the game, then you get continues and a one of about, I would say there's about 8 power-ups when the game is really too short to have 8 power-ups. And honestly, any Arkanoid game probably should only have like a couple of power-ups. sticky ball where it sticks to the paddle and then you can relaunch it. Makes sense. Being able to fire projectiles forward and just shoot as like laser guns makes sense. But some of the other power-ups in Death's Hangover are like Ghost Ball, where the ball just goes through and very often gets stuck inside of objects, is kind of unnecessary. A bomb ball that just explodes and destroys everything in the area is rather unnecessary. Multi-ball makes sense as a power-up just to add some craziness and make it feel a little bit more like pinball. But then there is also like a tower ability where you just place it down the tower that shoots a fireball forward in a column. And then there's a scythe ability that shoots projectiles in a slightly different way. And there's a fart ability where it shoots out fart gases, which is like a smaller version of the bomb. And each of these power-ups have like super versions of their power-ups that you're almost never going to see all of them in a playthrough. The game also, Death's Hangover, has very high difficulty options, but I am playing it on easy and struggling with it. It has a story, which is kind of surprising for an Arkanoid clone in the first place. Let's see. Which one of these wouldn't be a tuner? If you control a warrior monster, you can special summon this. If you control a fire monster, you can special summon this. Is this a fire monster? I think everything here is going to kind of fail. I think. Turned into a 0-0 and turned defensively. I don't think I know the strategy here to get around this. So what's the synchro summon possibility here? So yeah, as an Arkanoid game, Death's Gambit is a little weird, and then it gets even weirder in the storyline, and it's just a massive amount of cursing. They reference Dracula as your main bad guy, as Bastard Dracula the whole time throughout the game. There is a plot line here where the characters you're playing as are the two male warriors who Death has taken your souls and thrown them into female bodies, which, if you take it in a more enlightened way, it's an interesting philosophical question as far as just like forced transgenderism or unintentional transgenderism, but really I have to take it more on the surface level that it was just supposed to be a joke about, wouldn't it be funny if you took these mighty warriors and male warriors and threw them into a female body. Yeah, I have to take it that way inherently because the rest of the jokes and the rest of the dialogue is just so full of edgelord teenage style cussing, which doesn't make any sense at all. You're just going to alienate a small percentage of your audience who may just have wanted to play an Arkanoid game that looks fairly decent otherwise. There is also some weirdness in the game in that there is a story mode that unlocks after you get so far in the original arcade mode, and the story mode puts in these interstitial sections where you're no longer playing Arkanoid, but you're just walking around and dodging dangerous rooms and dangerous items in rooms, and all that serves to do is to drain your lives even faster. There's just a lot of points in Death's Hangover where they have intentionally made sections to drain the health, drain the lives of people. Which is really not appreciated by me at all, because it's just going to make it more difficult to get to the end of the game. And that is definitely where I am stuck right now, as I'm at this boss fight at the end, but I have only 5 lives, and when I lose those 5 lives, I'm gonna have to activate that by all means. See if that works. Nope. No such luck. There's also some weirdness, I think, in the final boss fight against Dracula, which I think is the final boss fight. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a way to unlock a whole nother castle, because it does look like there's a castle floating in the sky in the area selection map. But yeah. There's a weirdness in that Dracula plays very much like he has a paddle also. I'm gonna run out of time here. So it's a paddle ball and then another paddle that the enemy has, Dracula has, and so effectively you are just doing Pong there instead of Arkanoid. And you're actually trying to damage the wall behind him and get the ball behind him, which is not any way you've fought any of the other bosses in the game. In a lot of ways, Death's Hangover, I keep wanting to call it Death's Gambit, is kind of the exact example of what I'd like to see if you're going to make an indie game, if you're going to try and take something simplistic like Arkanoid and put some new twist on it that would make it stand out from all the other potential Arkanoid clones that do occasionally pop up on Steam. But it does also have the feel and the claim that it was made by only one person, and it does have that feel of being perhaps a niche genre and a niche game trying to be way more difficult than it needs to be. It just doesn't feel like it was probably play tested by a lot of people. The irony here is if you have a AAA game, they often get play tested to death where any small bit of difficulty is removed, and I'm mostly okay with that. I'd rather have a high chance of getting from the beginning to the end instead of getting stuck somewhere. I suppose it is also worth mentioning that in Death's Hangover, you go through a run and you need 4 souls at minimum to actually fight Dracula. If you don't accomplish that, then you are thrown into fighting Death, and fighting Death and defeating him gives you, I think, pretty much just a bad ending. And that boss fight is also incredibly difficult. I just happened in that boss fight to be able to get the bomb power up and then use the bomb as a one-hit kill against Death. But in that level, you're given the ability to collect a soul. So if you die, you reset, you can collect a soul and get a continue. In Dracula's level, there's literally nothing you can do. It's actually very terrible. All the previous levels have like 5 rooms, and Dracula has 5 rooms, but there's nothing in at least 2 of the rooms. So they're just rooms where you would, I guess, potentially lose a life if you really screwed up, or you're just wasting your time. And there is a sub-boss fight before you get to Dracula also, so it does create this weird situation where you can lose a lot of lives before the sub-boss fight even happens. Or you can lose a lot of lives in the sub-boss fight. Otherwise, I guess I really don't have too much more to say around Death's Hangover. It is an Arkanoid game, thus there really isn't too much to say. I really do wish I had just an infinite amount of skill and time and resources, because after finishing up playing Cracking the Cryptic before I started playing Death's Hangover, I still am feeling like it would be nice to experiment with something like the Godot engine and try and make a rogue Sudoku game which combined the concepts of a rogue-like and a rogue-lite to do Sudoku. There's even a decent chance that there's an open source Sudoku puzzle generator already available, so you could integrate that code pretty easily, and then it would just be putting a lot of polish on it to make it look like a real game. But yeah, undoubtedly that would be a fool's errand to even begin to try to do. I would have to effectively abandon my YouTube channel and for at least a year, making no content at all, to make a game that probably wouldn't even sell that well. I could probably bang out in 6 months a good vertical slice template for it, but without using like a Unity asset store or pre-made assets, there would be a problem there with trying to make anything visually look good. which that would be a major sales point on making a video game version of Twist on Sudoku. But yeah, I see some parallels between that thought in my head with a Rogue Sudoku game and Death's Hangover. And in a lot of ways, Death's Hangover really does take the concept of an Arkanoid game and try and make it look more polished, but it also still is kind of missing something. One of the things that's weird is that they're somewhat proud of their animation of the two characters. And it's a weird game in particular since it also lets two-player co-op play, so you probably could beat the game a lot easier if you did have a second player, because the second player just plays as a death character that can shoot slice infinitely, which would be very, very easy in a lot of the boss fights. It would make a lot of boss fights really easy. But it also is kind of impossible to control both a mouse and a controller at the same time, which is what I would need to do if it was just going to be one person playing in two-player mode. But yeah, there's still room for improvement. So, and honestly, Arkanoid being like the evolution of Pong that really just stopped after that one evolution, I don't think it can be much of anything. Like, you could potentially have it like a hacking mini game, which is inside a bigger like first-person shooter type experience, but even then, I think that would find itself just being fairly annoying. Yeah. It would be an interesting question, certainly, as far as whether you really would want to do a lockpicking mini game, or whether you would want to do a Arkanoid minigame. I think lockpicking minigames would definitely be just way more familiar overall. Even the hacking minigames that you see often are kind of unfamiliar things, so people have to learn those unfamiliar things a little bit more. I think there is definitely an argument that some people would make to say Arkanoid was close to a perfect game when it was originally released, and that's why there is just not a lot of room to improve it. It is effectively a single-player air hockey clone from a real-world equivalent. You could try to put some gimmicks on it, try to put like billiard twists on it or pinball twists on it, and that might help a little bit, adding just a lot of weirdness around an Arkanoid game. But I think one of the things that Death's Hangover really highlights too, though, is that a square room that is not zoomed out really far just doesn't really work. It does need to be more of a vertical, the ball is going to go up far and stay up far for a lot longer, pinball type experience. Then the ball's going to bounce and come back fairly quickly. Even Pong would have been on a 4:3 ratio on the sides, so the distance between the two paddles should be a little bit longer than the height between the top and the bottom of the screen. On a 16:9 screen, Pong would be even better, because then the distance would be a lot further between the two paddles and the ball would just travel a lot more. Although arguably Pong on a 16:9 screen then probably needs something to happen in the middle of the screen, otherwise it's just going to be a big empty space in the middle of the screen. There is several bits of news. The Nintendo Direct basically just happened, so we probably should just jump into that today. Yeah, there's video game adjacent news too. For instance, the Borderlands movie is starting to really put out some press material. So let's see if we can make that any bigger. No, not really. So the one thing that was striking me, the magnifier's not going to help here, was this Jamie Lee Curtis character. I just didn't recognize this at all. But Jamie Lee Curtis is playing Dr. Tannis, which was kind of a more side quest character. But as the big name here, I would say she's bigger than Kevin Hart or Kate Blanchett. Yeah, I guess that character is just going to play a bigger role in the Borderlands movie. And I'll show more images here in a second, but my overall impressions here definitely feel like there's just a high chance that for people not familiar with Borderlands, and for people who maybe in the future will have forgotten completely about Borderlands, there's just going to be a high level of weirdness in the visuals of Borderlands. The weird comic book cartoony colorfulness of Borderlands in the video game form, I think almost needed to be twisted in the form of a movie back into being real, hyper-realistic. In particular, the wig that Kate Blanchett is wearing to play Lilith here just looks like, I guess, the wig that girl in Lazy Town was wearing. It just looks like a fake costume wig. Kevin Hart is probably the wrong person to play Roland. In general, I would say we'll see how he is written and how he acts, but his dress is not that crazy. Jack Black being Claptrap is a weird choice there, but a robot's gonna look like Claptrap particularly well, so I don't think there's too much of a concern around that. Pretend like that's a trap. When Florian Muntanu is a person I've never even heard of, playing as, what does that say? Krieg, K-R-I-E-G. I think that was one of the bad guys in Borderlands 1, named Psycho. but he might also be one of the DLC characters from Borderlands 2. I imagine he's not going to say that much, and he's just there to look pretty and be shirtless. And then the look here is just kind of crazy. Like, you look at the face, and yes, in fairness, Tiny Tina is supposed to be crazy, but I think this is one of those cases also where more realisticness was going to be needed in this in the movie. Ariana Greenblatt. I've probably seen her in something else. Which, by the way, she's biting the pin off a grenade, which will break your teeth. It's not actually doable, even though they show it in movies and TV all the time. Although, in all fairness, it's probably not the worst thing if a general person who hasn't been trained how to throw grenades in the military doesn't know the right way to pull a pin on a grenade. I think I would say one of the problems here with this face is, yeah, it definitely just comes off as like either weirdly proportions or lack of freckles, perhaps. In contrast, I think like Jamie Lee Curtis just looks like Jamie Lee Curtis. Kevin Hart just looks like Kevin Hart in the face. And there's not too much you can really do about that unless you're going to go on full-on CGI and change the appearance of the faces. But none of the characters really feel like the characters in the video game. So I think that's possibly part of my concern and feeling as far as the reception here is, why are you showing me effectively a bunch of celebrities cosplaying as the characters from Borderlands, but then trying to make all the costume and visuals look like Borderlands? I think there's really two ways you could probably have gone with Borderlands, or at least I would have gone with Borderlands. This is almost certainly just an opinion. And the two ways would have been, you go, we're going to do a full-length feature film that is CGI, or rotoscoped, at least. And it's going to be cartoony and the exact same art style as Borderlands. And this is effectively just going to be something that's for the fans of Borderlands to see a movie based on it, and it would be like a Mario movie equivalent. Which, yeah, maybe that would work, maybe that wouldn't. Maybe you could even do something like the Sonic movie where there was some human characters balancing out a lot of the Sonic movie. And really only Jim Carrey as Eggman is the weird looking character there. But then Sonic himself is just a CGI character in the Sonic movie. This card can do quite a bit. No. Let's see if we can accomplish something here. grab spells. This is a lot of things happening here. Yeah, I think that's all I can do. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by Yu-Gi-Oh! Here. The other thing you could do with Borderlands, though, in my opinion, the other way you would have delivered it, is you would have just had it been a really hyper-realistic visuals thing. You'd get rid of all of the colorfulness that you see here. Like, you can see all this colorfulness and explosions in the background. I think you'd just get rid of all of that. And then you'd have characters named Lilith, Dr. Tannis, and you try to make it, like, way more serious than Borderlands has ever been. And try and take it in another direction. Which, yeah, that wouldn't really feel like Borderlands. To do it that way, but maybe that's fine because that's kind of the direction Borderlands is going anyways, as Randy Pitchford has kind of teased that there might be a Borderlands 4, which, I mean, obviously you would tease that there might be a Borderlands 4. It's either going to be a case where Gearbox makes a Borderlands 4 for 2K, or Gearbox makes a brand new game that saves them out of, or Gearbox is just going to be shut down as yet another failure of the Embracer Group acquiring them. But yeah, unfortunately, if you weren't going to go hyper-realistic in a Borderlands movie, you gotta kind of decide what the movie is even about then, because it really is just going to feel like a Western without much of a plot. We may find that the Borderlands movie does have just like a unique new plot anyways, but I couldn't for the life of me tell you what the major plot or motivation was in Borderlands 1, other than you opened the vault at the very end, but I don't know why you were opening the vault per se, or why who you even were as a character, that you would have just arrived in I think you arrive in a city and then somebody tries to kill you and that's pretty much it. You're just constantly trying to be killed. Most of the plot in Borderlands 1 I think starts to really ramp up about halfway through, once you have the main bad guys trying to kill you versus just random skags and psychos trying to kill you. It might very well be a case where Kevin Hart as Roland, since we know Roland dies in a weird turn and twist. Oh yeah, there was that whole angel character that was telling you what to do in Borderlands 1. Yeah. And so that's why you were playing and doing things. Let's try this third deck. Yep. Here we can see Borderlands is memeing on a dubbed in line for Madam Web that's not even in the movie. Meet Roland. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died. This dubbed in line just a run-on sentence saying too much. In the Madam Web trailer, they're referencing a different character. Yeah. But since we do know that Roland dies, and that's the turning point where any character really in the game could have died, and it's not well explained how he died, since canonically in the Borderlands universe you were constantly being regenerated and respawned, and so was everybody else. So yeah. But that is the point where the game gets serious, and then they just eliminate Roland because he's kind of a boring generic soldier character. Most of the characters in Borderlands are kind of boring. They just have a few lines of dialogue they spout when they get a kill, and they mostly have just sound effects of having fun while killing psychos and shooting people. There is just the important narrative of Pandora and everybody on Pandora is that they are psychopaths and that they're crazy for one reason or another. Most of the people on Pandora are either workers or prisoners or enslaved prisoners or something like that. Anyways, and there is, I think, an assumption here that a lot of the characters on Pandora have gone crazy because they've just killed each other over and over again. And that is certainly another point to make here around Borderlands, is that it's a game all about guns. Like, that was the main thing they were selling it as, and in 2024, with just a massive amount of coverage and gun violence in general, it's hard to make a movie that's going to glorify gun ownership and having bazillions of guns. They'll still probably get away with it, but it is a decent chance that won't be received that well. And then they're just reposting other things. Meet Dr. Tannis. Her brain may save your life. Yeah, the more I remember about Dr. Tannis as a character, the absent-minded, kind of crazy research character, I just don't think Jamie Lee Curtis is really the right person to get, but I mean, it's a big name. And then it's like, meet Krieg, his name is Krieg. Meet Tiny Tina, specially known explosive way. They definitely picked I think, older actress here to play Tiny Tina, which I think that might be a mistake, but it probably is also the safer play. Like, the idea of Tiny Tina in the video game being like 12 years old works, but once you start to show that in live action, that would just be too young of an actor for kind of a highly demanding role. Because I imagine they are going to try and make Tiny Tina be a major character in the movie. And I think in the video game they kind of fail because they do age up Tiny Tina in the later games, and as a teenager, being a psychopath is not that strange. Either way, it still kind of highlights the weirdness in that Tiny Tina is like the smallest and youngest character on Pandora, and the assumption is every other kid on Pandora is just killed and doesn't respawn because they don't have any money in their account, because that's kind of how the system works. Here we have Claptrap looking just like a Claptrap. It would be very weird if Claptrap looked any different, really. A little bit more details, I imagine. And then Lilith, I think, is the one that's going to be the hardest to say yes to because of the glowing red fire wig here. Now, notably, there is also a weirdness here in that Lilith is really the only character that's going to have that siren magical ability, whereas the Borderlands 2 characters that all replace pretty much the playable characters in Borderlands 1, Mordecai is missing here completely. With his Hawk character. Guess we're gonna take that. Well, that probably ruined his strategy quite a bit. But maybe not. He's just unbanishing a lot of cards there. Let's see what this does. One normal monster for that. There, we've got a destroyed card. Two monsters. And then I think you just want to attack here. This probably is going to win. I guess let's check to see if we've done the daily quest already. Otherwise, I'll play one more time, but probably should put a little bit more time into trying to defeat this. But we've already gotten a pretty good start. This ends in 7 days, and apparently this started like 3 days ago. But yeah. Seems to me like if I just got 3-4 more victories, I would get to at least this point, and then if I get really lucky and finish this up to this point, I may just go back to the previous thing, which this ends in 4 days. There's this February festival stuff, which seems like the festival requirements for those overlap. Duel in a festival, effectively. Link summon in the A festival. But yeah, we've really already done the daily quest, so I think we should just go ahead and stop now. Now there is something here that I noticed. They are highlighting the gun here, but there's really only so much you can do in a video, in a movie, to highlight a gun. It is a sci-fi gun. It has, obviously, looks like some kind of grenade launcher, which would make sense because that would have been a thing. You do throw grenades. But yeah, the showing of stats, the highlighting of like grenades and modifying grenades and shields, all of that in a movie, you're gonna have to address that, if you address it at all, very quickly, because you only have 2 hours to squeeze in the important content from a 200-hour game. And so I imagine a lot of the concepts of the game are just not going to be touched upon. In fact, just having 6 characters for a 2-hour movie is questionable. And certainly it is questionable as far as just what would a Borderlands 2 movie look like if this actually succeeded. Which, as a movie, I'm not really expecting any movies to succeed at all. But yeah. Borderlands 2, the movie, probably needs to just keep on telling the story of the main protagonist from Borderlands 1 and not really bother to try to introduce any of the new characters in Borderlands 2. And yeah, I seriously doubt that we'll get to a point where we're addressing any of the characters in Borderlands 3. Which I'm not sure that the characters even change much in Borderlands 3. Like, either that or they just didn't highlight the playable characters in Borderlands 3. So I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed right now. I don't want to highlight that. I did make that new Blue Sky account, and I would have thought I would have gotten some emails or something from that, but nope. Seems like the onboarding process is kind of lackluster in that as far as getting people to check Blue Sky all the time. Although I did hear that a lot of the animators that would have been on Twitter in Japan, that people who would have posted anime characters, have been making Blue Sky accounts, and that a lot of people have jumped over to Blue Sky for that reason, and thus the Japanese version of Blue Sky is getting really full of a lot of animators style posts. Which, yeah, I guess that could work, but what works in Japan isn't inherently what would work for the rest of the Western world. And I wouldn't be surprised though if Blue Sky fairly quickly, even though it's supposed to be more of a federated and less censored type platform, and not really even a platform at all, I wouldn't be surprised if there is just a lot of block lists and a lot of censorship that start to show up, and then there will be some kind of controversy there. It may also be a case where Blue Sky, like Mastodon, may be really good ideas that never get adopted or don't get adopted until years later. Facebook is kind of a great example of that, where Facebook in its original generation wasn't anywhere as popular as it is now, but now it's really popular with much older people and not popular with younger generations. So it is often a case where your target audience may just shift or evolve. So yet another Sword Art Online game, according to Gamatsu, has been announced. This one called Fractured Daydream for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Which the art style here seems a little rough with your two main protagonists. Basically, this is a case of just Bandai Namco not having much else that they can greenlight easily. I wouldn't inherently believe that Sword Art Online is still that popular. I don't think that there's been a new anime series in a couple of seasons, winter, fall, such as that. Inherently though, if you're trying to make just JRPG games and sell, and you don't have any original ideas or content, just leaning on Sword Art Online makes a lot of sense. I guess it makes some sense to do that. I can see here that they're making references to the first anime season and the second anime season and the third anime season when they add in the guns. And so I would assume this sword fighting section here might be even later seasons that I haven't even seen. And this is yet another example of them putting part of the anime in the trailer, so watching that was probably a mistake. But yeah, this animation in particular looks fairly rough, and just a generic constellation in the background feels very rough. So it does definitely feel like they are near the end of really being willing to fund making any more Sword Art Online things. This has all been done before with the .hack series of video games too, where there was an anime that was somewhat popular called .hack, and then Bandai Namco, I think it was pretty much Bandai Namco again, just released a ton of .hack games. Although I would say it may very well have been the case that the .hack video games back in the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 era were actually more popular and better than the .hack anime itself. And yeah, but it does all just seem like it's coming from a kind of jaded perspective compared to something like Atli or Ryza or Dragon Quest, where those are video game series first, and they're trying to actually make good stories in the video games versus just trying to make a generic Japanese RPG and throw a coat of anime story on it. And I don't think you'd even, honestly, I don't think you can make a good argument that Sword Art Online is great anime storytelling either. But yeah, it does definitely seem like Bandai Namco just owns the rights to it, so they keep doing it. In the same way that we see a lot of Dragon Ball games come out. Although in the case of Dragon Ball games, at least Dragon Ball Z was very popular and is still somewhat popular. It is Dragon Ball is the equivalent of WWE, I guess, where if you get into wrestling, you'll probably have some affinity to wrestling for the rest of your life. Hi-Fi Rush is coming to the PS5 on March 18th. It's currently already available for the Xbox Series and PC. So this is one of the 4 Microsoft games, Microsoft subsidiary, Bethesda Softworks games, that is going multi-platform from all those rumors. But when you actually just get the headline, it's not that interesting, really. Like, yes, I do want to play Hi-Fi Rush. Do I want to play it on the PlayStation 5? No, because I don't own a PlayStation 5. Could I have already purchased it and played it on PC? Yes, if I had spent the money. So it doesn't move the dial at all for me as a PC gamer. And it wouldn't have moved the dial for me if I was an Xbox gamer to just see this a year later. I think this is a year-old game come out to PlayStation. A Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection has been announced for all consoles and PC, which I guess the question here really would come down to, has there been any Battlefront game that has been hard to get a hold of? And I just don't know if that really is the case. This might be more of a situation where they've taken a game that was very multiplayer focused and maybe DLC focused, and they've just made a bundle. But I don't know if the Battlefront games are particularly playable if they have really single player modes to them. So that might be a weird situation. Here is the simulcasting terms of service on Twitch, by the way, that I was looking at. The requirements to simulcast are only if you ensure the quality of the Twitch user's experience of your simulcast is at a minimum no less than the experience on other platforms or services, including your engagement with the Twitch community, for example, via chat. So you can't just ignore the chat is what they're really focused on here, and they really want chat to be a big thing. Although inherently it doesn't say that you couldn't just ignore all chat, which is probably what I would do. Like, if you just didn't engage with any chat on any other platforms, and just said that this is a no chat thing, then the more reasonable, and that's a fairly reasonable requirement, is you can't provide links or otherwise direct the community to leave Twitch for your simulcast on other services. And then they explain this because they value the community on Twitch and the integral community engagement plays for all Twitch users. So I can't just say everybody who's seeing me on Twitch should come over to my YouTube video stream and like it and watch it and get me more watch time, which inherently this is a danger, certainly, if you started to split your audience and you couldn't get enough views either on Twitch or YouTube. And certainly my first goal would just to be to get enough subscribers and enough watch time on YouTube to get ads running on YouTube. And then you can't use any third-party services, which theoretically does not mean you can't use first-party or second-party services. If you personally made something, or if you hired a company to personally make something for you, that would be a second-party service that would combine activity from other services during the simulcast, such as merging the chat or other features, which, yeah, that doesn't really change too much, because you could just have two windows with two different chats open, like as long as they're not merged. There, if you were running ads, there might be some more complications certainly there, as far as running an ad, doing a simulcast, or running sponsored content. But that's not something I would focus on at the moment. Yeah, and frankly, none of it's anything I'm going to focus on at the moment, because I just proved that, at least directly from my computer, OBS can't handle streaming to two things at the same time, which is not super surprising. Or at least streaming and recording, and then also accidentally recording a second time. Let's see. Video Games Chronicles says classic rare games have been added to the Nintendo Switch Online. This is RC Pro Am here, which that is a really old NES game. Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo, and then Battletoads. Is that just Battletoads, or this? It says Battletoads Battle Maniacs, and then Blast Corp for Nintendo 64, and Snake Rattle and Roll, another old NES game. I assume this is in part the deal, and frankly this might be the part of the deal that Nintendo cared more about, is that Nintendo needed some old rare games to put on their online service, and as such they were willing to work with Microsoft, who owns Rare now, to maybe allow some more newer games on the Switch also. Although I doubt it really is the case that Nintendo is actively trying to stop Microsoft from putting games on the Switch. So yeah, this probably just came as part of the deal. I imagine if I was ever to go back and play Blast Corps, this would have been a game I probably rented for a weekend. I probably wouldn't find a lot of entertainment on it. Same is true for these NES games, and even Battletoads. Killer Instinct for the Super NES might still play pretty well, but it might also be rather slow and clunky by modern styles. Even the Killer Instinct reboot, called Killer Instinct, is old enough now that if you're to actually just try and play it, it may feel very clunky. Helldivers 2 has been a big story, a victim of its own success effectively, in that its servers can't keep up, and thus the reviews on Steam are going down and down because people are not able to log into the servers. There is, I think the number was like 700,000, maybe even 7 million people trying to play Helldivers 2, when 7,000 was the biggest concurrent number for Helldivers 1. So they definitely really wouldn't have had a reason to believe that they would have been so successful, and almost certainly a lot of their success is coming from just good timing and nothing else being available at the time. But in this specific GameDeveloper.com article, the Arrowhead CEO says that overhiring would be a horrible response to Helldivers' success. The quote here being, "The act of overhiring to then do layoffs is just a horrible practice and a bad experience for employees." Which, in fairness, I agree with that. Yeah. The other major statement in question being thrown to Helldivers 2 in Arrowhead is why don't they just buy more servers and spin up servers? And inherently, it seems like the case is there's just a lot of software that's not really capable of handling that many users at the same time, regardless of how many servers you get. If you have an SQL database and it really can only handle 10,000 entries or 10 million, 10 billion entries, whatever the number would be, running up a cache clone of that SQL database, so there would be two servers somewhere that are going to just have the same database, only helps you so far. Because both of those databases would still have to have the exact same amount of data in it. You can speed up connections by caching and redistributing where traffic goes and just having more servers in that case. But when the fundamental part of the programming just can't handle all the information, two databases, two copies of the same database that can't handle that much information, still can't handle that much information. So yeah, and it's not just SQL databases there. I imagine there's all kinds of network libraries too that really just can't handle that many players, and probably just assumptions as far as they figured they'd never have to deal with that many players. And the real solution to fix something like this would be that there just needs to be a lot more of Helldivers 2 that would just be a single playable game that could just launch and play and do something while the online servers are overloaded. They also said that people are getting into the servers, and then because they're having such trouble logging into the servers, they are staying logged into the servers overnight, creating a bunch of inactive accounts on the servers, which is just adding to the load. Although if it was properly programmed, that really shouldn't be that big of a deal if they're just sitting around doing nothing. But I guess there is an assumption that they're allocating some resources for every player that's logged in that could be allocated to a new person that is trying to log in. Of course, you could also just have programmed your application, if that was going to be the case, to kick inactive players after a while. So it does seem like there's just some obvious programming choices that could have been made to improve their problem, but the core problem is just being too popular. A remake of Epic Mickey is coming to the Switch, which I assume that means that Epic Mickey might come to PC in a neglected a remake of Epic Mickey 1 might come to PC in a kind of neglected form. I earlier in the last year covered and made footage for Epic Mickey 2. To my disappointment, Epic Mickey not being available, and yeah, that kind of sucked that I couldn't play the original Epic Mickey. Not that Epic Mickey 2 was the greatest of games. I do feel like there's a decent chance that there's a lot better content in the first game, and the second game was pretty much just an afterthought. Yeah, the first Epic Mickey game was a Wii exclusive and probably had a lot of Wiimote motion with the paintbrush mechanics. Whereas Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two, wasn't an exclusive and did come to PC. So it may still very well be a case that this Epic Mickey Rebrushed is just going to be a Switch exclusive. This may also be another potential game that is getting rushed out fairly quickly on the thought that whatever the next Nintendo console is, what is being referred to as the Switch 2, may not really have detachable Joy-Cons or Joy-Cons that can play games like Wiimotes. I would imagine on some level it would be very logical for the Joy-Cons of the Switch to be connectable to whatever the next Switch 2 is, even if the Switch 2 itself is much closer to the Switch Lite and the controllers are just attached to the screen permanently to play those kind of Wii games. Although that would just have Nintendo making the Joy-Cons more and more often, with stick drift problems continuing. This is also probably another example of Disney being willing to do kind of anything. I assume Disney said okay with this. This isn't going to be a case where they're going to say that Mickey Mouse in general is in public domain and Nintendo is just remaking something. No, you wouldn't have the Disney logo on it if you were just straight up trying to avoid licensing things. So yeah, Disney not being consistent here, and very possibly just throwing a bone to Nintendo while mostly focusing on putting all of their content in Fortnite instead, and Disney definitely putting no attention towards doing any kind of animation of modern times or Mickey as a character in modern times. If Disney was going to be ambitious, they would make a new Epic Mickey, not just a remake of the original one, or they would make a new Mickey game in general, or just anything other than like Dreamlight Valley, which is the last thing Disney-wise that I've heard about. A game called Endless Ocean Luminous was also announced for Switch. I don't know if this is based off of something that already existed. It seems to me like it is a multiplayer game where you're swimming under the ocean and exploring. So almost like an underwater metaverse MMO, but also kind of weirdly limited because of it's on the Switch. You can hang out and explore shared expeditions with up to 30 players online, which is not that many. And you encounter and learn about over 500 species of marine life, which makes it feel like it's probably a little bit educational. But yeah, I imagine this won't impress too many kids as a game. Then the Battlefront Classic Collection coming to the PS4 and 5 and Switch, so maybe it's just not coming to PC because it would be redundant. Mother 3 has been added to the Switch Online's Game Boy Advance catalog in Japan only. Mother 3 never got an official English release, and people meme, I think, more than actually complain about that. Mother 3 would have been called Earthbound. Let's see, the first game, Mother, was released in the Famicom in 1989 and finally got an official translation in 2015 as Earthbound Beginnings. The sequel, Mother 2, was listed as Earthbound, and Mother 3 in the series never came out in the West. And I question how relevant it really is. But yeah. Once again, an example of just like Nintendo Online running out of things really to release. Honestly, it would kind of just make sense to put up a warning and say this game is only in Japanese and then let it still be played, because those games are free with the subscription service anyways. So if somebody wants to just play the game and, I don't know, use something like Google Lens to translate the text or ignore the text completely, they should be just allowed to do that. It would be a great step towards making the games community just more permissive in general. Apparently, Endless Ocean was a Wii scuba diving series, so this is a sequel to that. Yeah. I suppose at a certain level this is an interesting twist on like a fishing game where you're just looking at the fish instead of trying to hook or hunt or kill the fish. So if you were into fish, and yeah, I know kids get taken to aquariums, but I don't know that many kids actually care about fish that much. Fish are kind of boring. And having pet fish is often disastrous and laborious. Always laborious. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance has been announced for all consoles and PC. It's due out June 21st. So what is this? A enhanced version? Which originally Shin Megami Tensei 5 launched for the Switch in November of 2021, so they're enhancing the game fairly early here. What are we seeing here? We've got one of the demon characters in kind of a bone armor outfit, and then you've got a lady character in kind of a skin tight tattoo outfit. Then you've got another lady character there. And you've got an upside down lady character in kind of a reptile skin outfit. Yeah. And then you have your main protagonist, devil character, in the weird skin tight outfit of his. It's just a lot going on in this image, a lot of reds. I don't know if you really even have relationships or romances in Shin Megami Tensei series, and I feel like the number of anime women in this is probably over highlighting them, because I don't think that is basically every character in the game. I would have paid more attention to Shin Megami Tensei as a series if the series was that every single monster you're fighting is a anime lady. Yeah. I guess I'm at the point where I assume Shin Megami Tensei sold pretty well, but I definitely didn't hear a lot of people singing its praises. I think it is probably another one of these games that has its niche audience and a pretty solid fan base, so if they make a new Shin Megami Tensei game, people will play it in Japan, but I don't think they're really even seeking to find a new audience. Although they are doing a decent job bringing it to the West, this is definitely the kind of game that in previous generations you would have seen only be released in Japan, or only released in Asian countries. A game called Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble has been announced for the Nintendo Switch. The game is coming exclusively to Nintendo's console in Japan. This would have been a Sega game. Yep. So it's one of two things here, where either we're just continuously getting more support for Nintendo Switch games, or you assume all of these announcements are the last games that will be released on the Switch. Now, the rumor is that the Nintendo Switch missed its target for the next Nintendo console. The Switch 2 missed its target for coming out this Christmas. So it may very well be a case where all, or at least some of the games that are being announced right now are going to come to the Switch, and then they will be cross-platform for the Switch 2 when that gets released in Q1 of 2025. Although we're not really seeing any games that seem like they'd be amazing AAA hyper-realistic games being announced anyway, so it may just be a case that the games that are being announced now are the ones that are not willing to wait until the Switch 2 comes out and are not that demanding and easy enough to port to the Nintendo Switch 1. Xbox Studios, Pentiment and Grounded are coming to the Switch, so that would be game 2 and 3 of the 4 games that are going multi-platform. So 2 games coming to the Nintendo Switch, 1 game coming to the PlayStation 5. That leaves 1 announcement game still unknown. Grounded is a weird one because I feel like most people that got hyped around it played it in such an early access state that there is a shortage of good coverage of Grounded in its current state, which is what I would need to know whether I would ever want to play it. Although I think it is also a multiplayer game focused anyway, so there may just not be a single player experience. I wouldn't be upset. I would like to play a single player experience where it's kids get shrunk in the backyard and it's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids effectively. Although you can't really make a whole series around that and keep my attention. Pentiment, on the other hand, is not something I really even know anything about. The rumors were that it would be Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, and Grounded. So it's Sea of Thieves would be the rumored 4th game. I was talking about how it was strange 2 or 3 streams ago. Well, a few days before this announcement happened. And I don't know if this is just coincidence or if it's just a matter of the timing being right or what. Certainly I didn't have any insider information, and certainly I don't believe anybody at Gearbox actually listens to my YouTube videos and heard me talking about it. But it just made a lot of sense to me that Gearbox, particularly right now with Embracer threatening to fire everybody who can't make any money, and Embracer in general just needing as much as money as possible, it made a lot of sense that this game Battleborn, with all its art assets, should reuse those characters, should reuse the programming that they did there as far as the attack animations and the abilities in some way, it was really crazy for Battleborn to be released and then kind of fail. Now, I'd forgotten about it, but Battleborn had come back last year for a brief time. So they had stuck their toes into bringing back Battleborn in some ways. But yeah, Battleborn, the player base quickly declined, primarily due to the release of another hero shooter, Overwatch, by Blizzard on May 24, 2016. Gearbox had already been developing Battleborn and fixed their expected release date when Blizzard announced Overwatch for a release a few weeks within Battleborn. So Overwatch just ate their lunch, which that might be an indication of the problem of just capitalistic competition in general. When you're talking about forms of art and entertainment, competition is good, generally speaking, when you're talking about quality products that need to compete on price. But when you're talking art and things that are just competing for people's attention, competition can really hurt the artist and the sellers of art. Inherently, for every good artist out there, there is probably a lot of unknown artists that are just as good that aren't selling as well because everybody's looking for a Banksy, for example. Yeah. And that kind of competition can be a problem. It is probably more uniquely a problem for video games in that you generally could only sell one Banksy to one person, and then everybody else would have to buy the other artists from lesser known names, artists. Whereas in video games, if Overwatch comes out, everybody who wants Overwatch can buy Overwatch, and the need for the player base to be large is an exclusive to video games problem. By July 2016, the concurrent number of players had dropped below 1,000, compared to more than 12,000 at launch, which wasn't really that high. So they gave up on it after the final update on October 23rd in 2017. The servers were shut down and were announced to be shut down in 2019. They were completely shut down, I assume, by 2021. A user-driven project, Battleborn Reborn, brought back the project to unofficial servers in 2023. So this Wikipedia page doesn't even have the full story here, though. They're not mentioning that they did bring it back, Battleborn, for a brief time at some point in 2023, I believe. Nor does this cover the fact that, and this is the reason why I'm talking about this at all, otherwise this would all just be history not worth mentioning in the news program. They have announced that they are going to resell Battleborn, but they have changed it quite a bit. No longer is it going to be a free-to-play live service game. It is going to be a full, like, $20, I think they said it was going to be $20 game with all the DLC and content built into it. The progression systems therefore must be changed a little bit, and I'm still not 100% sure if this new Battleborn game is going to have any kind of online component at all. One would assume that to save money they would eliminate the online component and just make it a single player game. But yeah, that is what I was saying. Probably they needed to do something with it. It would have either been to take all these characters and all the skins you've done and try to integrate them into Borderlands or a new game series, or just make Battleborn a single player game and re-release it. And frankly, it's a 50-50 coin shot as to re-releasing it, because you do have the stink of failure around Battleborn as a title, if anybody remembers that or looks it up. So keeping that title seems kind of like a mistake, but then you're still going to have that stink of failure when people see the characters, if people recognize that those characters are from Battleborn. But you also can't hide that. So if they had changed the name and then it was the same visuals and the same characters, they just would have been accused of reselling old content, which you might as well just be upfront and say we are reselling old content. It's definitely not a move. While it is the right move to do, it's not a move that is in parallel also being announced alongside a Borderlands 4 or some other game from Gearbox, which is the right way to really announce something like this. I think it's called Battleborn Reborn is the new title for the game. We'll probably see it in later in the stream. But yeah, you definitely would have wanted to announce a new game and said, oh, by the way, we're bringing back Battleborn as an extra thing, and maybe you bring it back and say it's available for purchase now as a one more thing or a surprise thing. The way they've announced it just makes it feel like that Gearbox is desperate to make money, which is pretty obvious that they probably are desperate to make money, because I imagine Embracer Group is going to just try and shut them down. Which won't even really affect Borderlands that much, because then 2K would just hire a different company to make Borderlands. And I think Randy Pitchford, whether he is the CEO of Gearbox, which is still owned by Embracer, I don't think that matters too much to Randy Pitchford. He would still probably want to be attached to Borderlands and probably succeed at staying attached to Borderlands regardless of whether there is a Gearbox company or not. Larry Herb retweeted this. Well, first he tweeted anyone headed to PAX East, but he retweeted this other one pointing out to what he's been doing lately. I guess finally one of the companies he's been advising is this company called Aghanim, which is a integrated commerce, live ops, automation, community engagement, and payments platform for mobile games. So it's a back-end service provider for live games, and apparently they just hit a key funding and product. This is founded by the, let's see, go ahead and close that, former CEO and CTO of Exola, which is not a company I recognize either. But yeah. So apparently that's what Larry Herb has been doing lately, other than just kind of posting things. He is retweeting more video games stuff and Xbox stuff nowadays, but I think increasingly he's becoming irrelevant in his tweets too. particularly I'd say since Larry Herb, Major Nelson didn't show up at the most recent Xbox podcast. He wasn't invited, I'm sure. He wasn't the surprise announcement that he's coming back, which that would have been a really surprise, and that was something just way out of left field that I thought would be cool if it happened. I think we can pretty much assume now that he's not coming back in any big way to the video game world. He'll be an advisor to small companies that won't really matter, and his involvement won't really matter unless somehow he magically becomes the new guy in charge of Sony, which that would be a big twist too. Or if somehow he became the new guy in charge of Nintendo. If any of that was going to happen, though, there's no guarantee it would happen anytime soon. It could be years from now, it could be never, likely never. New Video Games Chronicle says there's some new Xbox Game Pass titles for consoles, PC, and cloud have been announced. They include Bluey the video game, which that's a weird twist, certainly. I could imagine very young kids being into Bluey, but I just kind of question whether Xbox Game Pass owners are the right age group for Bluey. There really have never been that many good or that many kids games in general, so seeing Bluey as a Game Pass title is a surprise. The other games are Tales of Arise and Warhammer 40k Boltgun, and you can't get two different games, really, more different games than Bluey and Warhammer 40k Boltgun. Certainly. But it probably is the smart move that if there is a Bluey video game that's going to be made, that Xbox should probably strike while the iron is hot, effectively, and put the game out as quickly as possible and try and see if that actually sells any Xbox Game Pass subscriptions. There is also, I suppose, possibility now that your average gamer is just at a point where they have a kid and that kid is the right age for Bluey, and so it definitely wouldn't be a terrible idea for Xbox to try and court the next generation. If right now all the kids are playing PlayStation 5s, well, then the next generation of kids might say they want to go to an Xbox to get away from the PlayStation 5s. So yeah, and I wouldn't even call Bluey the age demographic for Bluey as the next generation of gamers. They are perhaps the next generation, if not the next generation. But that's a good plan too, is to certainly you have lifelong Sega fans and lifelong Nintendo fans that played video games when they were young. But even at that, Bluey, I feel like Bluey is for like a 4 to 5 year old, whereas I feel like the first video game console should be closer to a 10-year-old, maybe a little bit younger than that, maybe 8-year-old. So, but maybe that's changed too. Yeah. Maybe that I'm really off on the ages there. But you definitely have a weirdness in video game world in general, but particularly in Xbox games, in that the vast majority of Xbox games are rated M for mature. So one Bluey E for everyone game is going to have to last you for years, really. You're just not going to have other kids games. I'd like to see more kids games be developed, but I have very little faith that they sell or that people would bother to develop them. Perhaps that is even part of the boys club and just general underrepresentation by more nurturing people, which tend to be more female people in the video game development world. If there were more females in charge of making decisions as to what games get funded from publishers and what games get made, we probably would have more nurturing kid-friendly games instead of having a overabundance of hyper-aggressive first-person shooter games, which you would stereotypically assign to more of the male demographic as far as who's developing the games and who's funding the publishing of the games. Let's see. Here's the story we already talked about, where the Helldivers 2 studio CEO says capacity issues aren't just a case of buying more servers. We're hitting some real limits, says Arrowhead's Johan Pilstedt. If anything, I think there might be a problem here in that the CEO is just responding too often and talking too much. One statement of "we're trying our very best, we appreciate your patience" may very well have been the appropriate statement to put out, and then just go radio silent until you have new announcements to say, because you can only really defend yourself so many times before you just come off as putting out excuses. And for the most part, people that are upset that they can't get into their games are just going to be upset. So offering explanations are just going to come off like excuses in general. So it's better to just say, we hear your concerns, we share your concerns, we understand your frustration, we are working as hard as possible, and we will let you know. We will put out updates as soon as we can. Just put out something like that. Make that your pinned tweet. Make that your main response. If somebody else asks a question, you make that your canned response that you retweet automatically to anybody who asks those questions. You just don't say anything new. You don't take in reviews until this server issues have just been fixed. Which, on the other hand, you might very well assume that they may not really be capable or willing to do anything to fix the server issues, and they may just be waiting until enough people stop trying to log in, and then the problems would just go away on their own. Of course, every second that somebody can't log into the game, you're getting another negative review on your game. Here we see Siri on the chat saying hello Siri. Apparently Serious Sam is still getting mods. So a Serious Sam Reborn is the latest featured Serious Sam 4 mod, which you embark on a thrilling new adventure as Sam Stone and visit a vast array of environments, from eerie dark swamps to dense forest to searing lava caves, medieval dungeons, and forsaken towns. So Serious Sam, from the developers of the Talos Principle, which frankly I think the Talos Principle is the more interesting thing. Still, Crow Team is getting still trying to promote Serious Sam. But even here, you can see on this image from Crow Team, you have the Talos Principle 1 screenshot here and the Talos Principle 2 screenshot here. Clearly, the Talos Principle is the game series that more recently, in the past 30 years, overall it's been Serious Sam, but more recently they are doing good jobs with the Talos Principles, whereas it's really impossible for them to make a new Serious Sam game and it feel like anything. it is a dead series as much as Duke Nukem is a dead series, and there just really isn't a way to revive Serious Sam as a arena-based first-person shooter or third-person shooter. Obviously, though, it still has some fandom because they're showing off mods. This is something I imagine we should probably see less of on new services like Blue Sky, where you have people making Twitter accounts for every single game if it was even moderately successful. Instead, it really should just be more of a case of a individualized account for each developer or publisher, and then, or not an individualized account, that's the wrong phrase to use in this case, a generalized account for each publisher and developer. So there really should just be @CrowTeam and not @SeriousSamIam, which means somebody else already had Serious Sam. So often, most of these accounts just never tweet anything anyways, so it is fairly dead. Although in this case, I guess Serious Sam does tweet quite a bit, and for that audience and the hardcore fans of Serious Sam, I imagine they might actually appreciate that. So maybe I'm wrong about the idea of new accounts, new services like Blue Sky maybe still needing individualized accounts per game. That really is something specific to video games. It would be weird, certainly, but maybe it does happen. I'm not sure. Where movies had their own individualized Twitter accounts or Blue Sky accounts. Like, it'd be very weird to have something like, I don't know, the movie Seven have a Twitter account, and just every week or every month they tweet out something new about the movie Seven. There's only so much new you could say here. Siri says they're from Vietnam and this is their first time watching me on YouTube. Well, thank you for watching, I suppose. Yeah, I don't have anything particularly to say about Vietnam without, I guess, invoking my painfully ignorant knowledge of the war. Yeah. Let's move on. Apparently, Capcom has apologized for letting players down when Street Fighter V launched. The publisher expressed regret while celebrating the game's 8th anniversary. What's the most recent Street Fighter game then? That seems... I thought Street Fighter V was the most recent game. Has it been out for 8 years? Yeah, the game has since been succeeded by Street Fighter VI, which has enjoyed a much better start at a Metacritic score of 92. So Street Fighter VI is the most recent one, and it released in June. So they're basically just apologizing for a game, Street Fighter V, which just did not launch well. I don't know what it really gets you for apologizing now, like 8 years after the launch of it. Maybe it's just being realistic. Maybe it's being serious and not just making corporate speak. Maybe it is more of a Capcom Japanese style company just apologizing in general, even if they don't even mean it. maybe this is their desperate attempt to get people to talk about and play Street Fighter V, even though Street Fighter 6 is already out. But I don't know what that really gets you, other than perhaps a hope that people give Street Fighter 6 and potentially a Street Fighter 7 a more of a chance. But if video game companies in general started to apologize for poor launches of old games, they would just never stop. And by modern sales numbers, you'd have to practically apologize for every game. Even Nintendo would have to apologize for like Super Mario Bros. 3's launch because it didn't sell as many copies as it would have sold in 2024, just because there was fewer gamers out there. I mean, yeah. Inherently, I think there's probably a lot of people that would argue that Street Fighter 6 did not really learn much from the failure of Street Fighter 5 or the poor launch of Street Fighter 5. And there, I think, are enough people out there that would argue that the Street Fighter 6 still has some major problems too. And yeah, I think the Street Fighter audience is probably split quite a bit, where there's people who like Street Fighter 2, and then there's people who like Street Fighter 2 Hyper Turbo, and then there's people who like Street Fighter 3, and then there's probably a few people that even like Street Fighter 1, and then I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't too many fans of Street Fighter 4 or 5, but then the more modern Street Fighter players are probably playing Street Fighter 6. So, yeah. Fighting games in general are also those kinds of games where it's pretty easy for them to hit or miss, and it doesn't really matter if one is a success as far as how likely the next game would be a success. I would still say Street Fighter V and Street Fighter as a series is probably doing better than Mortal Kombat, because there's been about a dozen Mortal Kombat games and only 2 or 3 of them are worth mentioning, where most of the Street Fighter games feel like they're worth at least taking a look at. I would definitely choose to go through all the Street Fighter games over going through all the Mortal Kombat games. Moving on, let's see, the Godot engine is they tweeted out here, now they're reposting all the results. They were trying to do a trailer Tuesday, which is the idea of you submit a trailer for your game, but you have to give feedback on somebody else's in the thread, and seems like they've gotten 14 comments so far, and they're retweeting and reposting trailers. But you're looking at all of these games in the Godot engine. Well, this one's kind of an exception because it's a flat 2D animation style, but the rest of these feel a little rough in the 3D modeling. So it might be a case that it's very difficult or possibly even impossible to make a good looking 3D game in the Godot engine. But we are also in this weird position where you probably just have a lot of people who jumped from the Unity engine to the Godot engine, and they're now having to relearn everything. This animation of a 2D characters with 3D backgrounds is kind of interesting. I think the 2D characters look kind of interesting there. And I probably could just reload the page and see even more trailers. But yeah, they're as an open source engine, a free open source game engine, they are going to try to, I think, promote more games built off of their engine instead of using their Twitter account to do just updates of announcements of new versions of the software, which probably is better for Twitter. If you just wanted updates of the software, you just follow the GitHub email list to get that information. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says that the PlayStation Portal has been hacked to run PSP games offline. The exploit is the work of apparently Google security engineers. I think it is kind of weird that if you work for Google as a security engineer, you would want it known that you are hacking other things, or that you would want to be working on these projects. If I was a Google security engine and I was working on hacking the PlayStation Portal, I would probably release the information under an anonymous hacker alias of some sort, and not just say, oh yeah, my day job is I work as a Google security engineer, and either as part of this day job fully endorsed by Google, or just as a side project while still being known as a Google security engineer, I've hacked this thing. The problem that people assume here, and it's probably true, is that the PlayStation Portal is such a weak Android tablet, effectively, that getting it to install and run the PlayStation 1 PSP emulator is really only a small step, because it's just not going to play the games well. If this could have happened where you could play PSP ROMs on the PlayStation Portal, Sony would have integrated that as a feature and sold the PlayStation Portal as a much more interesting device, instead of it being a very overpriced streaming device that effectively is just a tablet with some controllers on the side of it. But yeah, it's really an announcement that doesn't really mean anything. Don't go out and buy a PlayStation Portal if you're expecting to hack it, unless these things go on sale for like $5 or something, which they're like $200 now. Let's see. I wanted to highlight this. The Binding of Isaac creator, Edmund McMillan, or maybe Tyrone Rodriguez, one of these two, were retweeted this fan art, and I wanted to highlight this fan art to really just point out where the video game cutesy 8-bit style of characters in the Binding of Isaac really were necessary, because once you start to go somewhat realistic on the visuals, it just gets too intense. Frankly, you couldn't play the Binding of Isaac as a game if the characters were this detailed. Anyways, you would have to scale down this image to be that same size, and scaled down this image would not be visually recognizable, readable. But yeah, you have these enemy characters, and it's a little gory and not too intense. But then you have like Lilith here as a fan art character, and it's just way overly animated here. And yeah, now what this kind of fan art would work fairly well with is if you wanted to make a comic book based off of The Binding of Isaac, or an anime based off The Binding of Isaac. But for the video game, it really doesn't make sense. Here we have Lilith with a very gory fan art here. And then, well, this might be Lilith. I forget which. Here, but yeah. And for fan art, I'd say this is pretty good, but it is also kind of inconsistent too, like in the color palettes, in the art styles. But yeah, that does, I think, really highlight where The Binding of Isaac would go too far. It already goes fairly far for a lot of people. There's definitely a large amount of religious and conservative people who would never play The Binding of Isaac, which is still why I think The Binding of Isaac modded and censored to just be more family friendly would sell like hotcakes. But yeah, if it went even further, even more extreme in the graphics and less childlike in its animation style, it definitely would turn off even more of an audience. The next story we have here is that ex-Mass Effect and Horizon veterans have formed a studio called Fun Dog Studios. The newly revealed studio already has its first project lined up with a tactical horror shooter called The Forever Winter. Which, yeah, I imagine we're gonna get several new studios forming from all the layoffs. But it's almost always the case when they announce themselves as a studio that's made up of former ex-Mass Effect or Horizon veterans. It's 2 or 3 people who worked on a game, where potentially hundreds of people worked on Mass Effect or Horizon, and it may not in any way be the 2 or 3 people who had major influence on the development on a collaborative effort of making a game like Mass Effect or Horizon. But yeah, I do expect we'll have a lot of announcements from layoffs of new companies. I also still expect that there will be a lot of layoffs still to happen. And a lot of these new companies never even make it to the release of their first game. Or they release their first game and it's just not particularly impressive. Here's another screenshot from the Borderlands movie, which I think this highlights the fake wig problem that's catching my attention. The fake bunny ears on Tiny Tina is fine because she was always wearing fake bunny ears. I mean, it's still not in line with the video game animation style, but that looks fine. But the Firehawk flowing fiery hair just being turned into a red wig, it seems like it's been permanently affixed. Feels weird. And then Kevin Hart as Roland just seems out of place because he just looks like a soldier. And yeah, her as Tannis feels out of place in several ways because she's just not, she shouldn't be with the team in the field. Dr. Tannis is always just in the background. And yeah, it still feels weird that Mordecai is just not apparently in the movie at all, and that instead you have Krieg, which I don't think Krieg was even a playable character in Borderlands 1. But yeah, here you can see the hair swooping again. They've been incredibly quiet about the Borderlands movie, and now I imagine they are going to go full on promotion of the Borderlands movie. It's still highly likely to fail, or just be a niche movie that just does not make any sense to anybody who hasn't played the video game. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com has this article that apparently over 500 titles earned more than $3 million on Steam in 2023, which may not be that much. I'm gonna throw out one of two numbers that I think are correct. I think in 2023 either 4,000 games came out on Steam or 14,000 games came out on Steam. If it was 14,000 games and only 500 earned 3 million, that definitely isn't a lot. If it was 4,000 games and 500 titles earned 3 million, well, that would mean about 1/8 of, let's see, 8 times 500, yeah, that'd be about 1/8 of all games on Steam made over more than $3 million on Steam. And see, that seems like that's too much. And I may be wrong about both those numbers. But yeah. Sales apparently increased from the Steam Autumn sale. I imagine the Steam Deck is helping a lot with sales too. Although inherently just putting out this information is really just going to encourage more people to make worse quality games and assume that they can make money. I would hope that a headline like this would convince the low effort asset flippers to realize that only 500 titles earned more than 3 million on Steam, and thus it's not financially worth it to make a low effort asset flip. But that almost certainly isn't actually the case, because if you're spending no money because you're just stealing assets from the internet, or you're spending very little money because you're licensing really cheap assets from the Unity store or some other storefront, and then you're just flipping it, and if you're only spending $200-300 to make a game and you're selling it for like $3, you only need 100 sales to make back to break even, and then it's just pure profit from an asset flip that can sit around forever on Steam. There definitely is an argument that some of the really poorly performing games on Steam should start to be culled and just removed from sale. Inherently they are removed from sales anyways, because you'll just never likely going to see a bad game from it unless you seek it out and know the exact name to type it into the search bar. But yeah, as somebody who looks at all the games that come out on Steam, there's still far too many garbage games being released on Steam on a daily basis. Generally, for the video game industry, you would want to see the number higher. But also, maybe you don't want to see the number higher as a consumer of games, because you don't want to see more people charging more for video games, or more people like making more games if you can't really afford to buy all the games and play all the games you want to play, which I doubt there are very many gamers out there that can afford to buy all the games they want to play and have the time to play them. So if the industry overall just kind of shrunk, and next year we saw that only 400 titles earned over 3 million on Steam, it's probably it would probably be helpful to see that number, to see the industry just kind of shrink before it overinflates and pops and just bursts like a bubble, and then the entire industry would collapse a lot further. We want small peaks and small valleys as far as the general index of profits and losses in the video game industry. You don't want giant peaks up to a bubble where games become $100 each and people just swear off playing video games completely, and then the bubble bursts and then you have a collapse all the way down. There is some talk that we might, if mishandled, see the game industry collapse and fall apart like it did after the oversaturation of garbage games in the Atari era, before the NES came back and really saved the video game industry. But yeah, that probably would never happen. But there is that danger, certainly, that we see a collapse in the game industry and it gets down to just people playing games on their cell phones. Terrible advertisement-based games on their cell phone, or microtransaction-based games on their cell phones. A Pokemon Direct with, quote, exciting news has been confirmed for this month, according to Video Games Chronicles, which this Pokemon Direct probably isn't going to reference Palworld, since Palworld now, for the most part, seems to have left the general conversation. And so this will be probably the first real presentation from the Pokemon Company since Palworld came out, so I imagine they will just not announce or react to it too much at all. What would be interesting, though, is that the exciting news is that they are bringing some Pokemon games to PC in direct competition to Palworld. Palworld's lasting legacy could be much greater than itself if it finally pushed the Pokemon Company, which is partially owned by Nintendo, to start releasing games on PC. But if they were going to do that, I would imagine what they would release is probably a port of something that's already been on the Nintendo Switch for a while. One of the remakes or re-releases of the first Pokemon games. It would make a lot of sense to, we're going to release Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow on PC, unedited, unremastered. And then they could just be so far behind as far as releasing the old Pokemon games on PC that it would never actually conflict with the sales numbers of re-releasing or remaking Pokemon games on Nintendo consoles. But people would still kind of eat that up if you just released the original Pokemon games through a basic emulator on Steam on PC. Let's see, Nintendo has also confirmed a partner direct for this week. This may be the partner direct that just happened. I guess it is, so this is no longer important news. Here we have Video Games Chronicle saying that Gearbox's co-founder seemingly hints at Borderlands 4. At what point did we start referencing Randy Pitchford as the co-founder of Gearbox? Who was the other co-founder? Fan theory suggests the announcement may come next month. Randy Pitchford has been really good about not causing any controversy. Apparently he did an interview with IGN, and frankly, if this is the main thing that's coming out of that interview, yeah. Fan theory is that Borderlands 4 may be announced on March 19th, given that the official Borderlands account on X has started posting what appears to be weekly recaps of the previous games in the series. So if they're just going through all the games once a week, March 19th I guess would be I don't know where you're getting March 19th from that. So The theory believes that the announcement will tie in with the PAX East Expo, which was where Borderlands 3 was also announced. Okay. So it's just kind of baseless speculation. Borderlands 4 and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands 2 were spotted on LinkedIn profiles of a former Gearbox employee. Okay. It would make sense to announce Borderlands 4 and do it fairly quickly, since Borderlands 3 kind of fell flat. Also, they've just got nothing else other than Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and maybe a Duke Nukem game. So it definitely makes sense to go ahead and announce something like that. What's funny is this image has the psycho putting finger guns to his head, which is a gesture, I guess, nowadays that can get you in trouble on a playground in kindergarten, even doing it to yourself. This parallels the shooting yourself in the head in Persona 3. And I wonder if that was intentional or if that was just probably not intentional, I would guess. I doubt that this old artwork in any way would have been trying to reference Persona 3 back when when Borderlands 1 came out. And here you can see this is the art style of the actual game. And so this is kind of the rotoscoping art style I would have expected the movie to look like. Also, considerably less detail compared to Krieg that we've seen now. We haven't seen any vehicles, and vehicles did play a pretty big role in Borderlands 1 and 2. Maybe they stopped playing a big role. But yeah, it would be weird if we didn't see at least one vehicle somewhere in the movie. Here we have GameDeveloper.com article. Phil Spencer says that Xbox layoffs will ensure the company, quote, has enough of the right people, end quote, to succeed. The second quote here is, I need to put us in the best position for long-term growth, which these are just kind of basically the things you would say as a manager, as a capitalist, is that yeah, layoffs will help the company succeed in the long run. And I can't really argue too much. Well, I think I could probably complain and argue about most layoffs from most video game companies, because most video game companies have very few people employed in the first place. Microsoft, with the Activision Blizzard merger and with the ZeniMax Bethesda merger and Double Fine and several other companies that I couldn't even name, they just have so many employees. There's obvious actual redundancy there that needed to be addressed, and particularly bringing in the Activision Blizzard employees, knowing some of those employees are problematic, getting rid of that, laying off people makes a lot of sense. And inherently, with the Activision Blizzard merger, a lot of these layoffs are probably in like positions where gamers in particular and your average employee at any average job wouldn't really mind to see layoffs. If it's middle managers, if it's HR people, the kind of people who are just paper pushers and don't really do anything, often are the causing the problems or just seen as the problems by your average worker. If you're not laying off the creative people, the programmers, the voice actors, even the QA people, the QA people mostly do get laid off quite often, but I would say even a QA person is more creative and more productive and positive to the development of video games than HR people who are just there to cover the butts of the corporation, and middle managers who are often there to just cover their own butts and keep themselves employed. Microsoft definitely can benefit from flattening its ladder and flattening its corporate structure, so you don't have situations where you potentially have 12 managers above you. Even in the Xbox division, I imagine there's at least 2 or 3 managers above Phil Spencer before you get to the CEO of Microsoft. So there's probably room to flatten the structure there quite a bit too. And then if you look at Microsoft in general, Microsoft has like a ton of employees, but are they really doing a great job with making Windows 11 better? Or are they just adding garbage? Or are they making Windows 11 worse? Are they really doing a great job with Word? Is there even any improvement that needs to be made to something like Windows or Word as far as new features, versus just making sure your code is bug-free as possible and as optimized as possible? Yeah. When you're talking a huge corporation there. Now, on the other hand, I'm singing the praises of layoffs when really, if your goal is to keep everybody employed and maintain the system of capitalism where you have workers and they earn money and that's how they thrive and survive and pay for food, clothing, shelter, things like that. If you're trying to keep that scenario going, instead of, say, going for universal basic income instead, and just admitting that automation and the amount of work needed to be done for a society is much less than it used to be, if you're trying to maintain capitalism as it is, the right move isn't to allow companies like Microsoft to lay off people. The right move is to probably break up Microsoft in the first place and just have multiple companies where it would make sense to keep everybody employed and have all the managers and HR companies, and prevent mergers like the Activision Blizzard merger, which it obviously would have been better for the employees at least to have prevented the merger. We'll have to see if it's better for gamers in the long run if the merger had not been allowed. The other solution certainly would be to just have unionization, and then with unionization there is an assumption that there would just be some redundancy and that people would just be paid to do less and work less hours, or paid more for the hours they're working. That too would eliminate the possibility of layoffs. Of course, if you're going to go with unionization, then it kind of needs to be more of an equal playing field, so all the game companies around the world would have to also be unionized. So you can't just outsource your work to a different country or move your corporate headquarters to a different state in the United States to avoid unionization. But in the current system, if there was ever a company that was bloated and needed to lay off people, it would be Microsoft Gaming Studios, Xbox division. Moving on, the maker of the Cat Lady, I follow him on Twitter. He apparently had a bit of nostalgia. Someone liked his first post about his first game from 2007 on the Adventure Game Studio forum. He says, "This is me from a different era. I can hardly recognize myself." Yep, and this looks like this is a early prototype of what the Cat Lady eventually became as far as a horror adventure game. The downfall of Joe Davis probably became Downfall, or the original version of Downfall. But yeah, I guess that's not really news as much as it is a reminder that there are still a lot of old forums from a long time ago, and people occasionally do find these old forums. Moving on, the Final Fantasy XIV Xbox Series X and S open beta has now started. Okay, Final Fantasy XIV is, I think, the MMO one. Yeah, once players reach 70, they have to pay a monthly fee to continue playing the game. Interesting. Is that how it's going to work always? Is that it's a free to start, but once you hit level 70, which is probably not that high of a level? Well, that seems fairly generous unless you just level up after 70 battles. Well, frankly, if you leveled up after 70 battles, that's still a pretty generous free to start situation. I guess I kind of forget that Final Fantasy is even on Xbox or coming to Xbox. It feels a little awkward that for so long it's been mostly PlayStation that have had Final Fantasy games. Let's see, Helldivers 2 got a new update which includes prep for increased server load. The game has been struggling with capacity issues. We already talked about that. Phil Spencer claims that getting rid of physical games is, quote, isn't a strategic thing for Xbox. The caveat here, though, is it says, but it will follow what customers are doing, and right now a, quote, majority of are buying games digitally, which this really highlights the tyranny of the majority, because it really could be just 50.1% of players are buying games digitally, and then Phil Spencer and Xbox could justify getting rid of the disk drive. Which, yeah, that's not going to make the other 49.9% of players happy, if that's really how the percentage broke down. Clearly, they're not making an argument that they have any commitment or moral feelings or obligation to having disk drives. And weirdly, we kind of need something. It may very well just be cartridges. That we are lacking in cheap media at the moment. Like, you have Blu-ray discs, but they're just going to get bigger and bigger. Games are going to get bigger and bigger in size, and so it's going to get to the point where you're putting in 2, 3, 4 discs to play a game on your Xbox, which would still make an argument to keep the drives around, but we don't have any other competitor, because there isn't like a USB thumbstick that's cheap enough to hold enough space, as much as easier it is as it is to press CDs. What will probably happen is the factories will start shutting down making Blu-ray discs, because we'll just see a decline of Blu-ray discs movies being made. And once the factories shut down, it'll just become more and more expensive to have like one factory in the entire world that presses UHD Blu-ray discs. And yeah, I don't think you can just once the discs get more expensive, then it will just go fully digital. On the other hand, you still have a problem as games get bigger and bigger that hard drive space is not getting much cheaper either. So games in general just need to stop getting, are going to have to stop getting so big. And we may just implement a lot of tricks like deep learning super sampling and AI generated images to scale up graphics so the actual download size of games stay the same size or get smaller. This comment certainly is in the shadow of the thought that this cylinder that would be a driverless Xbox Series X is going to be announced and come out at some point. And I think Microsoft may very well try to flippantly release this and say this is not replacing the Series X, this is just an alternative version. Although it's questionable whether you could release this at any real discount compared to this one, because disk drives are really only about $20 when you buy them in bulk. The bulk discount that Microsoft is getting, at most I would expect they're paying $40, less than the price of a game. So removing it saves you maybe $40, maybe $20, but then it causes you way more than $20 or $40 worth of bad press. The only reason I'd see you would put this out is if you hit the point where making the Xbox Series S with less RAM, if that just stopped being profitable, you're saving, I imagine, more than the price of the disk drive with the Xbox Series S with a slightly slower CPU and less RAM than you are taking a drive out. And the big solution here still could be, we're going to release this, but then there will be a USB or Thunderbolt compatible USB-C, USB Type A, USB 3.0, 4.0 connector. One of those standards. Those were several different competing standards, and really. But yeah, if there's just a USB plug on the back and you can plug in a disk drive, and then they just sell the disk drive as an accessory, I think that works fine. I think that's the way forward for all consoles, really. It would make a lot of sense if there was a disk drive you could plug into a Switch and then install games, bigger games, to a Switch that way. And it's not like there's that much security difference anyways. The connector internally to a disk drive is possibly encrypted between the disk drive and the rest of the motherboard, and possibly has a security key burnt into the disk drive. But you can pretty much do the same with a USB thing. Yeah, not that many people are going to try and pirate discs anyways. If you're going to try and pirate Xbox games, you would probably just use an emulator or put a mod chip in the overall Xbox Series X. You wouldn't just try to breach it via the drive. I don't think you would, at least. Apparently there's an Xbox Canada account, which, you know, they have this bright, colorful logo. I guess people mostly are not doing anything for Black History Month, but in Canada, I guess that might make some sense. But they do seem to be advertising things fairly differently, this Xbox account. Very noticeably, it's Anime Week on Xbox Canada's Twitch channel, and they're going to celebrate anime games by playing anime games during the whole week. Which, yeah, that does perhaps highlight that it is just the United States Xbox. The Xbox just called Xbox here, which I guess Xbox is using the same colorful logo now too. They must have just changed it. But yeah, it seems like maybe just this Xbox Twitter is not as interested in promoting anime games or Anime Week, which that would be typical for United States companies, Western companies to pay very little attention to anime games. Although, in fairness, it's not really like there's a great reason why this would be Anime Week anyways. Like, Persona 3 Reload makes sense, but Digimon Survive has been out for a while. Dragon Ball Z, Kakarot, Shinobi Strikers, or what is this? Whatever Naruto game this is. I can't even tell you what this is. Infinity Strash. Yeah, I don't even know that game. Yeah, Persona 3 is about the only new-ish anime game. I don't think Tokyo Game Show has any time recently. Why did I click on this person? Oh. This Critical Role. This person is in charge of brand and content strategy at Critical Role, and they are looking for a community manager, and somebody retweeted them. But yeah, I imagine there is very much a case where a lot of people think they can be community managers, a lot of people want to be community managers, and a lot of people think they need community managers and are willing to pay, when I mostly would question whether most community jobs, manager jobs, just don't really need to exist at all. Or, yeah. It is definitely one of these newer generations of jobs that didn't exist in the past. GameDeveloper.com says that Ubisoft is yet to address wage concerns after 700 workers strike in France. Our message to Ubisoft's management is clear, is a quote here. Yep, so yeah, they're on strike and the management hasn't responded. This is a great example of not news. It is a bad headline to certainly state your opinion fairly obviously here, that you're pro the striking workers and that you expect, and Microsoft is in the wrong for not addressing the concerns. The strike, this would be, yeah, an example of just like not really having anything new to say. So making a news article when there isn't actually a new moving factor, a new piece of information, a new fact to state, is really just not news. It's just bad journalism. Obviously they just wanted to make an article. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple days or a week they make yet another article or update this article. The news that would be news is that when the strike first happened, you would have said 700 workers strike in France against Ubisoft. They've already made that article, and then if the union came to the table with the management and they were negotiating, that would be news because something actually happened. If the strike was ended because they came to an agreement, that's news to report on. But to say a strike is going on and nothing has changed is not news. And no, you can't cheat that, in my opinion, either, and say, well, the strike day 1, here's an article. The strike day 2, here's an article. Well, the strike has been going on for a week, so here's an article. Strike's been going on for a month, here's an article. not until at least the strike goes past previous records. You could arguably make an article then if the strike had been going on for like a year and breaking any previous records. That might be worth mentioning once. But yeah, this is just another great example of not news. Let's see. Here we have GameDeveloper.com with another article saying that the former EA and King leaders have established a new studio called Cult of the North. So this is yet another new company. The studio has described its debut title, codenamed Project Gundolf, as a next generation mobile MOBA. I don't know what the M in front of mobile would be. Multiplayer Online Battle Arena is what I think MOBA stands for. So I don't know what M stands for unless it's Mobile Multiplayer Online Battle Arena. It is a new studio co-founded by the former EA General Manager Adam Schwab and the company King's Senior Vice President of Business Performance Marcus Jacobs. Which, yeah, those are managers, really, not really creatives, forming a new studio, which that is a little weird. Let's see. Kazumasa Habu is no longer the producer of Digimon games. The next Digimon story game is still underway. The new Digimon story game continues to be in development under its trusted director and team. So, I would assume this is this is not any big scandal. This is probably just an old person kind of trying to retire, an old Japanese person trying to retire, even though there's very little possibility of actually just saying you're retiring. Here the quote is, due to personal changes within personnel changes within Bandai Namco, I will no longer be the producer of Digimon games, Abu said in a tweet. In fact, I have not been in that role since last April, and I have been quietly passing the baton. Please rest assured that the new Digimon story game continues to be in development under its trusted director and team. Now, there are some Japanese companies that notoriously are over-controlling of their employees. They rotate out their emails, so you just can't even get in contact with them after a certain amount of time. Bandai Namco might be one of those companies that really is just crazy like that. But yeah, it doesn't sound like there's a big controversy here, other than maybe the big controversy is happening in secret and this guy is just not in charge. Now, from someone who hasn't really played any of the Digimon games, I'm not sure any of the Digimon games recently have been good. I'm not sure any of the Digimon games have ever been good. There should be some good Digimon games out there, but they definitely are not leaving an impact in convincing people in the West to play them. By all rights, Digimon should have been as popular as Pokemon, and it just has never gained as much traction as it should have. The Pokemon anime cartoon versus the Digimon cartoon, I would say the Digimon cartoons are eventually the stories got better. Maybe the first seasons were kind of rough. But yeah, this probably means a lot more to Digimon fans than it means to me as an outsider looking in. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com has an article here that says Valve is encouraging developers to tinker after an open sourcing the Steam Audio software development kit Our goal is to provide more controls to developers. There is definitely room for improvement as far as audio in video games. I don't know if the Steam audio software development kit is the way to go though, but we have seen Valve and Steam certainly try and do that with Steam input also. Clearly, there's a focus internally in Valve to try and make systems that will replace DirectX, direct input, and direct audio, all systems made by Microsoft. And in part, almost certainly, this is because they want games to run better and work better in Linux, whereas DirectX, direct input, and direct audio are first and foremost being programmed to run on Windows. It makes a lot of sense to also open source the code, even if you're still going to mostly control it yourself, or mostly still be the people who's programming it, just because that will let people see the source code and see what they can do with the source code. There is a lot of room for improvement in audio, but there's also not that much that you really need to do to audio in a generic game, because either somebody is deaf or they aren't, and we have not even begun to start having a conversation as far as shifting audio to different frequencies for people of certain hearing impairments, or adding audio descriptive feeds to video games for people who maybe are blind as more of a standard thing, or allowing people to do a dialogue pull-up in some cases so that they can hear the dialogue better, or allowing night modes so you don't wake up other people. And yeah, there's really just no embracing of like any DTS, Dolby Pro Logic type surround sound stuff. And that stuff is all proprietary, so you can't do too much with to have more surround sound. The article here says this comes after receiving a lot of valuable feedback and contributions from the community to the plugins already available as open source. So there apparently were already open source plugins for Unity and Unreal and FM Mod Studio, and they want to bring those same benefits to the core software development kit. This may very well also be a case of Valve just admitting that their total ability to program is going to be limited enough that they can't just keep everything internal. The company will continue releasing Steam audio bug fixes and features, but acknowledges it often chooses where to focus its efforts based on the requirements of its own internal projects, which is basically to say they are only going to fix things that work for Counter-Strike 2, pretty much. The entire Steam audio codebase has been released under the Apache 2 license, enabling developers to use the technology in commercial projects and modify or distribute it under its own licensing terms without needing to include the source code. Which, okay. It'll probably be a long time before we see any games that have decided to use Steam Audio's SDK over something else because it went open source. But in the long run, this is probably the right way to go with it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see stories very similar to this, where the entirety of SteamOS is open sourced. It may already be open sourced, I wouldn't be surprised if we see pretty much all Valve projects that they work on that they can open source being open sourced. Because, yeah, I don't think any of it really matters to Valve as long as they're constantly getting 30% on all the sales on Steam. I assume Lady Gaga is still important, so reporting on Lady Gaga coming to Fortnite is, I assume, real news. Season 2 of Fortnite Festival launches on February 22nd. Then here's another picture that we have of the Borderlands movie. And then Starfield's latest update adds support for FSR3 and XESS on PC. I don't think I've ever heard of XESS before. It's an Intel super sampling. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that. Okay. So, with that, I have a whole bunch of new tweets I'm not going to cover. Let's go through the games I'm going to make YouTube shorts on very quickly, and then let's make the headline clips at the end, and then that'll be the end of the stream. Yeah, I want to burn through all this because it's already been 3 hours, and I don't really know why it's been 3 hours other than I've just talked a lot. We even stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! About 5 minutes early. And I don't think I even really harped on one subject that much. There's just a lot of individual subjects. We have one of these RPG Maker games where the characters have large enough cleavage that you know there's probably an uncensored patch somewhere on the internet. Yeah, just gonna try and burn through all of these very quickly, which probably won't be too hard because we are seeing a lot of garbage games. I still have yet to get my programming working again with the making of clips, which isn't really that big of a deal. We'll give this a chance because I don't think clips are ever going to really matter. I did disable some of my macros so that the banners at the top won't mess up as much. Hopefully that will be helpful. Why did I put this on the follow list? Yeah, I don't see any reason why this should be on the follow list, and I definitely have made some mistakes and been too generous. Like, this is the kind of game I might have been more generous on in the past, but yeah, I just don't think there's enough game here. The idea of running around a tower in general feels like this would be a sequence in a larger game, and then it would make sense. It couldn't just be the sole part of the game and for it to make sense. Hunt for the lost ship, hunt for the lost treasure. Are we going to have something called the hunt for the lost treasure too? So here we have somebody flooding Steam with several different hunt games, and it's all from the same developer, and so they have just lost the privilege to get published. I actually played this game, The Enchanted World, on my cell phone. They were, I think, giving it away for free. There's nothing special about it, really. In fact, it was kind of frustrating in that there were some sections where you would have to click on a single pixel almost at just random places. Like I think there's a piece of paper here you were supposed to see on my cell phone. It's so small I couldn't see it. And then here you have the Enchanted World 2, which is basically the same images with just slightly different puzzles. Yep. But this is absolutely the worst way to put your games on Steam. I still probably wouldn't have made a YouTube short on these games anyways, just looking at the screenshots, but to flood Steam with all your games at once is dumb. It's just advertising against yourself. You should put out a game once a week at most. And frankly, Steam should probably prevent most publishers from putting out any games more than once a month. But yeah, particularly if you're through Steam Direct, there should just be some limitation that you can put out one game per month. That would help curate the games that get on the storefront, just kind of limit it. Does this language even support English? It says it does. This is one of the games where the character looks kind of cute in the thumbnail, but then is nowhere to be seen in the screenshots. Not quite visually polished enough, I think. See, it feels like this game is trying to go with like a cutesy Paper Mario, and I guess I'll give it a shot, but it's probably not good enough. Then the vast majority of the games are just absolute garbage. It's been over a month or two at this point since I last did any follow-us cleanup, so I probably should just make a special effort to do some follow-us cleanup. Definitely wouldn't hurt to do that. Proto Violence Definitive Edition. A Definitive Edition visual novel. Well, I guess I'll give that a chance since it's free. It's funny to make a Definitive Edition free game also. Fancy Pants Adventure Classic Pack. We'll give that a chance. That's an example of something that would have probably been a just Newgrounds game and maybe doesn't deserve to be on Steam, but maybe in that one exception. Operation Save the Girl Code X seems like you're just shooting girls, asset flipped girls in bikinis. Yep, and it's tagged as having nudity and not safe for work content in it. Let's see, which I question if you're really actually getting nudity there. Yeah, mistagging of games is still a massive problem that we're seeing on Steam. And a big point here of making YouTube shorts, other than to just get people to watch my videos in general and subscribe to my channel and give me more watch time, or allow me to earn more watch time, I guess might be a better way to say that. But a big part of the idea of making YouTube shorts is to try and highlight games that at least reach a certain level of quality by my general curation and assumption, looking at the screenshots very fast, instead of like trying to drown out, I guess is the right word to use, the massive amount of garbage that does get released on Steam. Which, yeah. Of course, the problem too about me complaining about the massive amount of garbage games that get released on Steam is I'm very possibly the only person on the planet that looks at all of them. Like, I have to actively program a macro. I had to program a macro to open up every single game on Steam to go through them all. There's no easy way to manually do it. So yeah, going out of the way, having the ability to program a macro, having found the right software to implement the macro, has created this unique experience for me, which creates unique content for my channel, which then potentially creates content that is worth talking about or looking at on my channel. Here we have a fighting game. You never know about these fighting games. It looks good. It feels like this might be a rather old game though, or it might be brand new for all I could tell. Interesting, it's tagged as controller required. Steam has really changed the icons and it's just general controller support concepts. And that is definitely part of the Steam input initiative, I would say. It's an effort that is in part pushing people to using Steam input. I'll give this a chance, but you know, actually this visual novel probably doesn't have a good enough screenshots to get a YouTube short around it. Well, I'll put it on the follow list. Please touch the artwork too. Okay, I'll give that a chance. Probably should do more research as far as whether please touch the artwork 1 was something. This might be something. Yeah, Steam only really expects people to like look at new games via the queue, and even if you went through 2 or 3 queues a day, you're only going to see 30 games a day, where I can easily tell you that there's closer to 60 to 100 games that are released in a day. You just aren't going to see them all using the queue, even if the queue was actually only showing you brand new games, which it isn't. The queue is still heavily trying to advertise to you based on what it thinks you want to play, and so you will often get advertisements for games that are older and or games you've already considered. Noticeably in Steam there is not a I don't like this game thumbs down. There's ignore with a couple different reasons why you can ignore it as played on a different platform, or ignore this, and then there's follow and there's wishlist. But as far as reviews go, thumbs up and thumbs down, you'd have to write a review, and there's no starring or multiple wishlists, which I'd like to have multiple wishlists as a possibility, because right now my wishlist is full of games I would be willing to play if if I purchased them, or if somebody gifted me a game off my wish list, which I really can't even legitimately ask people to do that. Let me see if anybody reviews this well. But yeah, I would like a smaller wish list that was just, these are the top 20 or 30 games I really would like to buy and play. And yeah, next time I have any extra cash and I am gonna buy video games, I am gonna probably focus on the top tier games, the more expensive games that I'd be willing to check out and play. Okay, I think that's it, and of all of those, I think I've got about 15 games there. If that's right, that's actually not terrible numbers. Okay, so then that's going to bring us to this page, SteamDB. Let's see where Palworld has fallen down to. Below 400,000 into the 6th spot now, with the regulars going very high, and Helldivers really is the story I should be talking about, now in the 4th spot. It does feel like Helldivers has grown very fast as far as concurrent player base, but it didn't just skyrocket like Palworld. Clearly Palworld, which had an all-time peak of 2 million players, could teach Helldivers a lesson, which has had only an all-time peak of 457,000 players. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink still maintaining the top 15, and it seems otherwise everything is pretty much the same. So here on my chart we have Helldivers 2 taking a slower burst up since the last time we got a data sample, in Palworld in that same time, perhaps making a slower decline in player base, and everything else being pretty high. Apex Legends shooting up here in the light blue. This light blue overlapping Palworld, making it kind of hard to... Palworld started here, went above to the maximum of 500,000, and then has been falling down, whereas Apex Legends has been low but then skyrocketed up about the same time people stopped playing Palworld. In fact, in this whole period, the best thing that has happened to Apex Legends is probably Palworld. Unless Apex Legends announced and released some content I'm unaware of, everything else seems to be doing about the same. The Rocket Blade point still going up, but kind of slowly. And then Steam, at the moment, not really having any sales. So we're gonna, I guess, play the game of how long until we see Palworld or Helldivers. It really should be how long until we see Helldivers. Although why even bother to promote Helldivers if it's already super popular? Apparently you can celebrate Bruce Wayne's birthday with 90% off by buying a game while Bruce Wayne is dead. Yeah. So scrolling down here, the Invincible Adam Eve visual novel being promoted based on games I play. So new and trending doesn't have War Divers. So I had to click here to get to Helldivers 2 and to see Palworld, which Palworld is about to fall down even the top sellers list at this point. Okay. So this should have changed the banner, but it didn't. I turned off some of the automatic switching of the top banners, which, you know, honestly that's probably fine. Although having Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in the top corner does seem kind of pointless, particularly since it's just on an error screen. So I need to work on it more than I did before. We're going to try and make the clips and see if this actually works. And I'm going to try and just burn through the news very quickly here, so we can be done. And then that'll be it for the stream. Endless Ocean is coming to Nintendo Switch with support for 30 players. Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble has been announced for the Nintendo Switch. Xbox Game Studios Pentiment and Grounded are coming to the Nintendo Switch. Classic rare games have been added to Nintendo Switch Online. Gearbox co-founder seemingly hints at Borderlands 4. The Final Fantasy XIV Xbox Series X and S open beta has now started. Elden Ring Shadow of Erdtree's release date may have leaked ahead of its first trailer. Helldivers 2 gets a new update which includes prep for increased server load. The first trailer for Elden Ring's expansion will premiere on Wednesday. Phil Spencer claims getting rid of physical games isn't a strategic thing for Xbox. Lady Gaga is coming to Fortnite. Starfield's latest update adds support for FSR3 and XeSS on PC. Sony is likely to launch a PS5 Pro this year, analysts say. February's PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic titles are out now. Sony's president wants Bungie to be better at assuming accountability for development timelines. PlayStation Portal has been hacked to run PSP games offline. Pokemon Direct with exciting news is coming this month. Assassin's Creed Mirage has been delayed permadeath mode arriving on Tuesday. Nintendo confirms a partner direct for this week. 11 years after its original release, Warframe hits mobile this week. A new complete Fallout collection comes in a mini nuke storage case. The PS5 Slim has been discounted by £70 in the UK. So overall, that wasn't too bad. We went through the news pretty quickly there. I stumbled on one headline in particular that I noticed, but yeah, that we were able to go through that very quickly. I just hope that my programming is actually working here so I can make clips based on that. Inherently, I think we had talked about all of that news already, so no need to recover it. And some of that news is old. So let's go through the Gamatsu articles now. We'll probably end up opening some tabs based on that. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth demo Dawn of a New Era in Ju-on update is now available. Little Devil Inside, despite all trailer and developer message. Apparently the message is they've genuinely started discussions regarding publishing. Well, shouldn't you be discussing publishing way before you announce a game and develop it? Plus, this game, Little Devil Inside, it's not something I've ever heard of before, and the screenshots are really not telling me too much, nor is this, and I don't have time to watch the trailer. Famitsu review scores for issue 1838. Let's see what the scores are. Bar Stella Abyss is getting 31 out of 40. Foam Stars is getting 33 out of 40. That's not terrible, but not amazing. Goblin Slayer Another Adventure Nightmare Feast is 27 out of 40. That is terrible. And Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is 32 out of 40. Again, not terrible. Noticeably, I haven't heard anybody mention Suicide Squad in at least a week. I think that game is pretty much dead on arrival. Tales of Arise shipments and digital sales top 3 million. Kazumasa Habu, no longer the producer of Digimon games, the next Digimon story game is still under development. Inti creates trademarks Card Int Seal, Flamefrit, Kingdom's Return, and Bokura no Kingdom in Japan. These may all just be mobile games or even visual novels. Hashtag Blood launches June 18th for PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. This is an animated dungeon crawler inspired by 90s cartoons. Let's see what this looks like. Well, definitely has that Nickelodeon Cartoon Network style, although there is no consistent Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network style of any era, 90s or otherwise. But definitely I've seen things animated like this on Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network from the 90s. I don't know if inherently that is a good style though. I think The World According to Bubblegum might be the cartoon in particular that this would be most influenced by, if that is even the name of the cartoon I'm thinking of. It may be not even the name of a cartoon. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the game, launches June 4th. This definitely was a weird game to be announced at all. But yeah, I assume it might be kind of a cheap license, and if you're gonna make just a weird game where you're running around being chased by sci-fi movie killers, they'd already done so many other horror movie, sci-fi movie games, you know, like Friday the 13th, the game. They're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel with killer clowns, but there isn't really that many things otherwise you could license. And I imagine it is just really easy to make a game like this these days. Or at least it seems like a good idea to make games like that these days. MOBA Revival Gigantic Rampage Edition has been announced for PS4 and 5, Xbox One Series, and PC. It's due out on April 9th. See, oh yeah, so I am confused here. Everything I said earlier about Battleborn is wrong. It's this game, Gigantic Rampage Edition, they announced. So yeah, they still need to do something with Battleborn and all the art assets they made for Battleborn and all the programming they did for Battleborn. This is Gearbox Publishing, which I guess is still a subsidiary of Embracer Group, putting out a different MOBA from a different developer, in this case as a single player game, I'm pretty sure. The original multiplayer online battle arena shooter Gigantic. This time it will be a dynamic and exciting team-based multiplayer game. So it still seems like it's multiplayer, but it's no longer going to be a MOBA. So inherently, it still very well may not be a game for me. But I would be interested in seeing how this actually plays out, as far as whether people actually care about the return. Each developer's abstraction games. In a lot of ways, it feels like if Gearbox Publishing can do this, I guess they probably can do this cheaper than programming on Battleborn and trying to re-release Battleborn in a similar form. But I wouldn't be surprised if this succeeds, that we do see a Battleborn game coming out that is similar. Let's move on with the headlines. Tim Tim's Swarm has been announced for consoles and PC. I'm pretty sure there's another game called Tim Tim. So this must be either a spin-off game or a sequel game. It looks like it's maybe a Vampire Survivors style clone. Medieval time travel third-person shooter strategy game Kingmakers has been announced for PC. That is a mouthful. Interesting. And that link just took me to a video, not a Steam page. So Gamatsu has got the link wrong in two different places. Yeah, that must have just been a copy and paste error there. We copied the URL from this trailer announcement into the links. Hopefully we don't see those kinds of mistakes increase from Gamatsu. I know Gamatsu is run by only one guy, it seems, so I can't be too upset with the extremely rare mistakes compared to GameDeveloper.com, which is run by multiple people, which makes, I think, journalistic integrity mistakes and moral mistakes sometimes, or even Video Games Chronicles, which occasionally makes mistakes and often just makes some weird decisions as far as what they're reporting on. Let's move on with the headlines. Xbox Game Pass adds Tales of Arise, Indivisible, Space Engineers, and more in late February. Interesting, they don't even mention Bluey the video game in this one. Which I would think that would be bigger news. It is actually kind of surprising what they are skipping here in the Maneater and Bluey the video game and Madden 2024 all being skipped over. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot DLC character Goku's Next Journey launches February 21st. Yeah. So it seems like they're going to be releasing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot Goku DLC in a row, several pieces in a row for for a while. I have no idea at what point the blue shirt would have happened, or this character would have played a role in the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot anime series or Dragon Ball Z series. Bang On Balls Chronicles for PS5 and Xbox Series launches March 5th. Is a free upgrade for existing owners. This is one of these games where it's a bunch of balls. This game originally came out October 5th, 2023. Saga Emerald Beyond Let's Play with Developers Volume 1. Yeah, this is the kind of headline I might have said is available to watch on Gamatsu, but frankly I think it might just be easier to do clips to always just read what the headline is in general and not try to add anything to it. Pokemon Day 2024, Pokemon Presents set for February 27th. Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase set for February 21st. Kamuri, What is Kamuri? Developer Diary. Apparently, Kamuri is a super online cooperative action player versus enemy game. Interesting. So I'd assume you're running around attacking something, probably giant monsters, and then you can possibly summon the giant monsters to fire on your side later. Power Wash Simulator DLC Warhammer 40k Special Pack launches February 27th. Okay, so that's all the Gamatsu articles. Let's quickly finish the GameDeveloper.com articles and then we'll be done with the stream. Arrowhead CEO says overhiring would be a horrible response to Helldivers 2's success. Phil Spencer says Xbox layoffs will ensure the company has enough of the right people to succeed. Motiga's gigantic rampage is back to life in April. Ex-Mass Effect and Horizon veterans form Fun Dog Studios. PlayStation chairman wants Bungie to improve its business operations. Ubisoft yet to address wage concerns after 700 workers strike in France. Former EA and King leaders establish a new studio called Cult of the North. Valve encourages devs to tinker after open sourcing the Steam Audio software development kit. Build a Rocket Boy confirms layoffs weeks after raising $110 million. Over 500 titles earned more than $3 million on Steam in 2023. And there's a report that Nintendo's rumored Switch successor will now launch in 2025. Okay. So that sets us up pretty good. Once again, though, these streams are getting longer and longer as we get closer, deeper into the year, and there's more video game news to actually talk about. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos, because that helps me with YouTube. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there might be a few links down below. There's also a link to Patreon. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.